So welcome to Engaging and Empowering School Libraries, a podcast that aims to raise the profile of school libraries by talking about topics that are current across education and teaching. This week, we're talking to Lauren Asprey about an online resource that Newcastle University has created to help students transition from sixth form to university. So I've come across these kind of resources a lot in my time when I was working in schools. So it's really fascinating to see that a new one has come out and whether things have changed since I was talking about sixth formers and going into university. So could I ask you to introduce yourself, Lauren, and tell us a little bit about what inspired the creation of this study skills resource, if you can.
Yeah, of course. My role is I'm a project coordinator based in the University Library's Education Outreach Department. So we're very lucky that we've got a small team of us specifically there to support students with our role is kind of 50-50 with study skills and the transition to university. And we also work to engage students and young people in the university's archives and special collections. So that's separate to this. So I was brought in originally just to project manage the work that went into making this website, and it kind of came from the pandemic, really. So the outreach team had previously had an iteration of this website that was a bit smaller, that came from a lot of local work that they'd been doing. So we offer study skills support sessions for A-level groups where they can kind of come in. We could do it online or in a local school, and they can find out about good practice for researching, finding resources, referencing, all that kind of thing. And it started off as a request-based thing. A few teachers who were teaching EPQ, extended project qualifications at the time, and kind of coursework-based subjects had requested these sessions. That grew and grew and grew, and we have this reputation sort of in our local area, kind of Northumberland, Newcastle, Gateshead, Tyneside, and Teesside. And it kind of got bigger and bigger. And so to meet that demand, the team created a website, but it was very much a sort of based on the demand of that time. And so that was around 2015, this website came into fruition. And things like this, as we know, with the way things advance, the date and
Yeah, they do.
and with the pandemic, I think that dependence on online resources sort of increased a lot, and sort of the students that the team were encountering, we were seeing kind of some of the problems were becoming, I would say, more significant. Students lacking a lot of confidence and a lot of the independence that is required of you when you come to university. And our colleagues in our academic skills team, so they deal with study skills support for current undergraduate and postgraduate students, were kind of seeing the same problems with stage one students as our team was seeing with A-level students they were meeting, and actually kind of had this conversation of, well, an A-level student in June versus a stage one student in September, they haven't suddenly miraculously learned all of these skills over the summer holidays.
No,
um,
exactly.
and so this relationship was born, so that they applied for a small amount of funding to have a go at creating some resources. And the entire centre of the project is that it's student led, so hired student interns to be part of the project. And they had a little kind of tester pilot go at it, created, I think there were about 5 resources, went through some focus groups to check they were kind of what they were aiming for. And because it went well, they were able to get further funding to have a project coordinator. So thankfully I came along,
Yeah.
and thus this was all born, and we worked for the last 2 academic years on it, and it soft launched over the summer, and we officially launched it in September. So that's kind of where it came from, really. It was things that were already kind of there but became, I guess, emphasized by the pandemic.
Absolutely, and probably more the online accessibility has probably become more apparent and more obvious and more needed. I would imagine, because I know, just working with schools myself, is that pre-pandemic, if I had said to anybody that I would do some online training, there was a real fear that actually, can't do that because can't do the internet. But post-pandemic, they'd rather do that because actually we've got the technology and we're not so scared of it. So it's really interesting to see how it has evolved over the years, and updated. It's so important, isn't it, especially with AI coming in. Goodness knows where that's going to take us. But yeah, it changes all the time, doesn't it? So can I just ask you, based on your experience, what do you think the biggest challenges that sixth formers face when they're transitioning from school to university? Now, I think you touched on it just a little bit in that introduction, but what do you think are the biggest challenges for sixth formers?
Yeah, so the beauty of this project is because it's been kind of student-led and user-led, kind of got a lot of this from the horse's mouth, as it were. So right back when I started, we did interviews with teachers and academics, so teachers working with A-level students and academics who teach stage one. And then we also had over the year five student interns who worked with us who were at university but had experienced UK A-levels and so had experienced that transition. And a lot of the things that came out were quite similar, framed differently from students versus teachers versus academics. I think one of the big things is decision making, like what do I do next? And that idea that when you're at school, like certainly secondary school up to GCSE level, you're working quite closely to a curriculum and kind of a lot of memorizing and a lot of quite, it's quite prescriptive what you need to know to be able to get through your exams. And as you move into A level, coursework-based subjects and then into university, actually you need to decide what you're interested in and you need to decide where you're going to go with that. And the other thing we had was actually one of our students was studying biology at university, and he'd done biology, chemistry, physics at A level, all exam-based subjects. Came to university, suddenly there's reports and essays and presentations, and these are skills that are classically not STEM in A-level spaces. So that was a real shock to the system for that student. And I think one of the other big things that's come out of this is having discussions, and the idea, if you've been through school your whole life with kind of familiar faces, especially if your sixth form is attached to your school and you're around the same students, then you go into a lecture, well, you just sit there and take notes. You can do that, that's fine. But then you go to a seminar or a workshop, and suddenly it's like, well, I have opinions and I have to share them in this space, and how do I negotiate that? And I don't really put my hand up, and that's been a big conversation. And I guess the other big significant one, feedback, receiving feedback, acting on feedback, the resilience that goes with getting feedback on your work. So writing an essay, you didn't get top marks, and then going, okay, why didn't I get top marks? And being able to take that and do something with that. I think at school we're used to our friendly teachers encouraging us a lot of the time, and then coming to university, someone who marks your work, you may never have encountered them in person before, and their feedback is constructive to try and help you. But when you're used to knowing the person and being able to go, oh, miss or sir, can you tell me what I did wrong here, and chatting about it, you don't have that at university. The list is huge, really. I could talk for ages.
I think it's really interesting that you're mentioning students not having an opinion. So one of the, I don't know whether you know, Lauren, one of the resources we use a lot is called Fossil, which is a framework of skills for inquiry learning. And in that, it encourages students to think about how they feel about something. And the first time that they've read something and you say to them, so what do you feel about that? The look, the horror on their faces that they actually have to go beyond, well, I've given you that piece of information, what do I think about it now? And they're just so, because it doesn't get practiced, I think it's very difficult to then feel that you are able to engage them in a conversation, because they don't want to look stupid in front of their peers. They don't want to be putting their hand up and asking the wrong question, although there's not a wrong question. I think it's a really difficult transition, that one. I'm going to bring Ruth in. I'm sure you've got lots of experience about this.
No, it's so interesting. Lauren, I work in a school that runs the IB. So we're not straightforward A-levels, and I don't know how much you know about the IB, but their whole ethos is about skills and about inquiry-led learning. And so we like to think, and I think our students would say that they are better prepared for the undergraduate experience than A-level students. And a lot of what they learn, they have to learn in order to get through the diploma, is what the undergraduates around them are learning in the first year of their course. And that doesn't always hold, but that's the idea. But interestingly, have just finished a project which I've been working with Elizabeth on, research-based induction program, and I'm still getting the feedback from that. But some of the feedback I've had is absolutely fascinating, and it's exactly that hand-holding. It's, you know, they can't. It's almost too amorphous for them. They can't get hold of it. They're not able to make decisions about where their research, you know, what they were asked to do was to find something that interested them and begin to research it. And that was almost paralyzing for some of them. It was so big and so open. And I said to them, you are used to a teacher giving you a question and you go away and you answer that question and you come back. And that's not the kind of research I want you to do. I want you to lead the research. And it's exactly what you were saying. You know, these students are year 12, so they're a couple of years behind effectively what you get. So I'd be really interested. I've literally finished it on Friday, so I haven't had a look to see where we are with it yet and what the feedback is. But it's very much going along those lines. And that was the sense I had from them when they were doing it was, you know, oh, really? We can do anything? And how do we? And how can I? And exactly that.
That's
Absolutely.
so fascinating. That's a really, really interesting project. Interested to know the results, and certainly the kind of the different contexts of the reason this has been delivered as an A-level transition project specifically is because to cater to different kinds of other forms of kind of 16 to 18 education, it's so unique. They are all different. Same with students doing BTECs, and same obviously from the university perspective. Internationally, even international levels are different. So yeah, that's so fascinating. And what you said about research, that's something that we encounter quite a lot. Even the schools who do bring their students into the library for a research skills session, and they'll get on that day access to some of our collections and journal articles and things like that. One of the big things is that the student will download all this material and then go, okay, so I've got to read it all from front to back, and I've got to take notes on every single paragraph, and then it's this. Even the most, academic and bright students will do all of this work, and then it's like, but you need to digest that into your own argument and your own, if they're doing a their NEA or their coursework or their extended project, they've got to be able to digest that and do something with it. So some of the resources that we worked on were as straightforward as different parts of a text, so how you can use the abstract or the appendix to get around it, and you don't have to read everything, and identifying your reading purpose. And then when you've got that, how do you take notes? And then once you've decided on the style you like, okay, how do you use those notes? So our resources cover really tiny, quite fragmentary bits of the journey, but that's the bit that if you miss out one of those steps, and even like I say, the most willing and able students actually struggle with that, because I think at school it's so much about learning as much as possible and taking in as much as possible. So yeah, I'd be hugely interested in hearing how that turns out.
I'd be interested to know, without being rude, I suspect you're too young to be able to tell me the answer, but when that changed, because I'm not sure. I mean, I think when I went to university, I did know how to read nonfiction. I knew that you didn't have to read the whole thing. I knew how to read how to use an index. I understood those kind of the facets of reading. I mean, I hadn't read academic articles of that kind before, but there was nothing in, I didn't have to be taught that skill. I had already learned it at some point. And I think, I'm assuming it's since the internet developed the way it has, and we are so much more used to finding what we think is the right answer in such a small snippet, that we have lost the skill and we have failed to carry on teaching those skills to our students. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah. Go on, Elizabeth, sorry.
Well, I'm going to say, I think you're probably right, Ruth. I think it is the birth of the internet in schools, because I remember that, my children going through that, and the school library becoming a thing that, if you went to get a book, if my children came home with a library book, it was really unusual. And actually they were being told to come home and click. So already that skill of finding and using information was being lost in the physical sense. And I think, you know, if I go back to my journey, I didn't do my degree until I was 35, but I had years of working in libraries, school libraries, and so that you're right. You know, I remember because I did my distance learning, and I would get a module, and when I first got my first module, it was like, how on earth am I going to read all of this? And then there was a really deep understanding that actually I knew what my questions were, and then knew which chapter that related to. So although I needed to have an essence of the whole module, those 2 chapters were the most important ones that I were going to need, and then it was the extended reading beyond that. But that isn't logical to most students, is it? It's not something that comes naturally, that you can, you know, read an article and find the references at the bottom, and that will lead you to something else that you might want to read. That just, but they don't come across it, I think, is the problem these days. I think.
Yeah, I would say I didn't do my A-levels that recently, but certainly when I did back when A-level creative writing was an A-level, I did English Lit, English language and creative writing. So I did all English, all very coursework heavy, had to do a lot of that at A-level anyways. So I came into university having done that kind of ground level. I know how to access certain things like a journal article. I think, certainly the student I referred to who'd come from a science background and hadn't maybe had space because you're learning exam content, you know, I think there are individual cases like that, but yeah, I think I very much relate to you, Elizabeth, in starting university, and you just kind of suss out your own way of doing things, and if you obviously had a lot of expertise and knowledge already, but I think for a lot of students as well, I almost wonder how much relates to digital literacy. So the kind of advent of the smartphone, and we found a lot of students who engage with amazing on their phones, really amazing with apps, but the very basics of searching, Microsoft Word, Microsoft and Google packages, just like spreadsheets and things. You know, that was a big thing that we were asked for support with, and part of our resources have kind of covered those basic things. But students almost kind of leap over the things that, for me at school, were like, that's what you're taught in terms of the digital. Whereas now there's so much more to learn, I guess. And I didn't have a smartphone until I was later on in my school life, so I didn't need to learn anything else. But it's fascinating because it does feel like certain skills have kind of dropped off at a point, and I always go back to the pandemic, and I just think, is it just that we're now going to see generational kind of shifts in what students actually do come prepared with and what students do know? But yeah, I think there's a kind of real gap in the it's that initial kind of go-getting, I know where I'm going to start part. I think that's somewhere that's not quite there.
So would you say that there's anything that schools could do, school libraries and librarians in particular, I suppose, to best prepare for the shift from A-level or IB into a university? Is there, you know, it's interesting that you've just mentioned Word documents and Excel spreadsheets, for example. Is it as basic as that? Because I think if I suddenly, well, and not that I work in a school anymore, but if I suddenly said to some students, right, we're going to learn how to use Word, they'd probably laugh at you these days, wouldn't they? They was like, what are we doing that for? But it's needed by the sounds of things.
Yeah, I think it's getting into habits before coming to university. So, you know, for certainly when I was at university, you still had paper copies that you would hand in, but most students still now, even though it's mainly digital, is still, you know, a Word document, a PDF, a Google document. That's kind of the way things are. It's getting into the habit of doing those things, and you know, using tools like that will come up later in life. So if you're going home and, I don't know, doing homework and kind of doing it on those kind of platforms. But I would say getting used to the library as a space that isn't just, and I know you'll both be aware of this, but that it's not just for people who like to read. I think it's such a kind of a difficult sort of bridge to cross, but kind of to get students thinking about using the library as this is what you do when you're studying, not just reading as a, even though we want everyone to be reading for pleasure. I think, we when we have schools in, we do so it's my colleagues teach these sessions, but we do tours. So sometimes I'll take a group of students on a tour and I'll take them to some of the books and I'll go, does anyone know what these numbers are? And some of them will have amazing school libraries, amazing school librarians. Sometimes their school librarians will bring them in and they'll go, no. And maybe they have been told, and maybe they've had an induction at the start of the year and they have been told, and I'm sure a lot of the librarians would turn around and go, yeah, they do. It happens often, but I think it's that active use, so you don't forget, and so that when you do go to university, it's like, okay, I've used whatever the university's search system is, and now I know where I need to go to find this book. And I think frequently seeing the kinds of resources that they might be using at university level. So like journal articles is a big one. Some students come to university, don't know what one is. No. And they are written in such often highly academic language, and they are quite difficult to access. But actually, if there was space for that in kind of sixth form college settings where students could, without the worry of, the fear of I guess, failure or not understanding or not getting it the first time, to be able to understand text like that. And that's why I think the extended project qualification and kind of equivalents of that, and I know there's the HPQ as well, which tends to be done with younger students, but any kind of opportunity for students to do research. And I know schools are quite obviously restricted with time, and I know it's not it's not easy to extend what is already done, but even things like coursework, building in that time that students can go out and do their own research, I think is and bringing in school, like it's also on the kind of the classroom teachers to bring the librarians into that part of the teaching, I would say, if it were up to me.
If it was up to us as well, Lauren, we would be doing I think that's the thing though, isn't it? Because sixth formers that I have come across, they seem to understand that the library is potentially a space that they can sit and learn, but they don't necessarily link with the resources that are around them. So they don't quite transition. So and not everybody either. So if you've got a laptop, you could be anywhere. You don't need to be sat in the library to do that. But it's that uncoolness that actually the library is not the place to be, or it's less of a, yes, you don't need the person that's sitting behind the desk to give you a hand because they've got nothing to tell you or help you. Do you find that yourself, Ruth? Do you know, I suppose IB schools are different, isn't it?
I have such interesting conversations with our students because our sixth form use the physical space of the library all the time. They love to come. It's a nicer space, physical space, than the sixth form building. And so they like to come and sit and work in there, particularly if there are none of the younger years in there. And they'll sit there and they'll work away and they'll work away. And then it'll come to the time when they have to write their personal statements. And they're all told you need to have actually read something outside the curriculum in order to write your personal statement. So then they go and look at the books, and then they come to me and they go, oh my God, look at all these amazing books you've got. And I say, yes. And they've been there all the time that you've been here, professing to me how interested you are in history or biology or engineering or whatever it is. All those books were there. And yes, aren't they interesting? And wouldn't it have been nice to have been reading those? But it's like, I mean, I can say it till I'm blue in the face. It's like lots of things with teenagers. They have to discover it for themselves. And then one of them goes away and says to a friend, oh my God, you'll never guess what Mrs. Maloney gave me from the library. I'm like, oh, really? An interesting book? Well, I'd never did. But it's exactly that. It's, you're right. They're using the physical space, but they're not connecting that with the resources. And we have no budget at all for online databases. So anything, I mean, I spend a lot of time trying to help them access material which is of a good quality, but free. So yeah, that's a struggle that we have, is finding material. I mean, they can read JSTOR online, and they do that. But yeah, that is a bit of a struggle, finding material which is going to push them to and give them the opportunity to read at that level, but is actually still relevant and reliable. But yeah, certainly they're not accessing the books without a push, I would say.
It is interesting that it's just it isn't seen as something that's necessary, but once you get to university, it definitely is necessary.
Yeah, and it's funny, as you say, most of them are readers, so they're reading the fiction, or they have been. So they may be too busy at this point to be reading fiction, but they are readers. They're not the kind of kids who would never be seen dead in the library. But there's something, and I suspect it's that those books are not used lower down in the school. I very rarely buy anything for kind of year 7 to 11, really, in the non-fiction side of things, because A, those resources aren't really being published. We've had this discussion before, and B, certainly wouldn't be used. So most of what I buy is for the sixth form, but maybe there's a gap there. Maybe because they're not using them lower down, they're so unused to using them that they simply don't even go and look. I'm not quite sure what I should do about that.
We'll come back to that one, Ruth. Maybe it's another podcast. Going back to you, Lauren, what do you think school librarians can do to help them make the most of your resource? So we know that your resource is there. Is there a structure through it? Is there a just dip in and see? Is there a pattern to it? How would you say, like, if a school librarian is listening to this, and we put the link in the show notes, what will that person find, and how can they assist their students to use it?
Yeah, great question. So the resources are broken down into kind of 9 main boxes. So there are 8 subject areas and a glossary of terms, and these were kind of dictated right back in the beginning when we were doing focus groups with A-level and undergraduate students, and these were the big hitters that came up over and over again. So it's hopefully quite clear to kind of work your way through. So if a student has got a targeted question, a really specific thing that they're struggling with, and that hopefully those areas help guide anyone who's using the website to the right place. They are kind of ordered in a way so that if a student, it starts with research, then reading, then writing. We've got revision skills for anyone doing exams. We've got communication skills, which is classroom discussions and also presentations. We've got referencing, digital skills, healthy study habits. So healthy study habits is study-related wellbeing that was created with counsellors from our student wellbeing team. And then our glossary of terms, which is just jargon-busting academic kind of terms that students might not have come across. That was also made with our students. So we think we're on the money there with that as well. We also have a section for staff where we've kind of called them our teacher guides for anyone who's teaching extended project qualifications or any kind of coursework. So if you have teaching responsibilities, it breaks down how you might want to use the resources. So for extended project, because the exam boards are quite similar in how they set it out, we've kind of gone by assessment objective and kind of said for AO1, these are things that might be interesting. For coursework and NEAs, obviously it depends on the subject, the exam board, etc. So we've kind of just got suggested, well, if your student's in a position where they're planning their writing or they're doing some research or whatever, here's how you might want to use these. And then we've got another guide for how to support students with their general confidence and well-being. So yeah, there's kind of, we've tried to put every resource out there that we can. I would say time again is such a luxury these days, but to be familiar with what's there so that when a student encounters a problem that you might be able to direct them somewhere more specifically. A lot of the stuff is probably stuff you've tried to tell your students before, and we hope that by making it this kind of self-led experience, that students can feel, you know, I actually might go and look at this, you know, and you know, I don't have to kind of be told what to do. I'll do it in my own time. That's kind of, we've tried to make it as independent as possible. But tell them that it was created with students just like them. There's a blog attached to the website, so it's in the top right corner, and the blog was completely written by our student interns, and they talk about their experiences of A-levels and transitioning to university from the point of view of study skills. So like, you know, messing up, trying again, things that work for them, things that don't work for them. And they're really, really candid and heartfelt. And I think getting students to kind of understand that it really is made by students, and that you know, they were like them, and you know, it's not uncool me sitting there and creating all these resources. It's kind of people who've been there and got the t-shirt. So yeah, but I would say hopefully we'd like to think the website is quite straightforward to use, but I think, yeah, hammering home that it's made by students with lived experience of going through A-levels and then going off to university, because I think that's the important part.
Can I ask you, do you have stats as to who's looking at it, who's using it?
No, we can't get that granular. So we could kind of see geographically. Anecdotally, we know certainly the schools that we're friendly with, we know when people are using it and what they're using it for. In terms of, yeah, specifically who is using it, it's quite hard to tell. So we launched the website kind of launched on the 25th of July, and checking the stats last week, we'd already had over 20,000 hits. So it's, you know, we're doing all right. I would like to say. But again, I can see what's being used and what's popular, but we can't actually identify who. So if I could tell you off the top of my head, our research skills stuff is doing really well, but that's the first box on the homepage, so I think that might be why. We've got some content that's the introduction to the Dewey Decimal System and a little Dewey Decimal game where you can reorder some books. That's doing really well. And we have a study timetable, so students can input, like, at the beginning it asks you what subjects you do, and then you can put in time in the week that when you're going to study, when you've got free lessons, you can build in your breaks and stuff. And it's got wellbeing triggers, so if you put, I'm going to do homework for 5 hours, it'll tell you, do you not want to take a break? So that's doing quite well. But yeah, unfortunately not. I wish we did know. Anecdotally is the only way. So we kind of say to everyone, please tell us. And you know, we have like Hotjar built into the website, so it's a little star rating basically, and if someone wishes to disclose where they work or if they are a student, you know, they can. So we've had some comments where people have disclosed like that they are from a certain school somewhere, so we can kind of suss out 1 or 2 people. But yeah, it's a shame. I would love to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you find out, so you mentioned you could see geographically. It's a bit like my website. I can tell where people are in the world, but that's about it. You're finding that most of it is in the north of England. But anybody in the country or anybody in the world can actually use it. They don't have to be coming to Newcastle University to be accessing that, do they?
Yes, we get hit in the website. We get hits from all over the UK, and then we have a lot of rogue stats that say it's from the US. But I think that sometimes people's settings on their phone or their laptop. I think it might not actually be. But yeah, certainly it's available to anyone, and it's available to students who don't want to go to university and they just need the support with their A-levels. But our in-person offer is local, but in terms of, you know, we do online sessions. I had colleagues dialing in to do a study skill session with an international school in Qatar this morning. So, and we've done stuff in Spain as well, obviously all virtual. Sadly, we're not flown out to Spain. But so the online stuff was because my colleagues started getting this demand from schools outside of the Northeast that they couldn't obviously justify kind of going to. So it's I'd like to think the stats are vaguely accurate, but I spoke to a colleague who works in the web team, and they were like, I think it might be something going on. There's not that many people in the US. They're probably just actually around the corner.
So have you had feedback then from students and educators about the impact and how it's influenced anybody yet, or is it too early days?
We've had lots of lovely feedback, which is nice actually. So we are yeah, early days, so not loads, but certainly especially the teachers and librarians that knew our previous website are very like, wow, you've got all this now, because it was very tailored to the schools we were in touch with at the time. So it was kind of went through essentially a piece of coursework, an essay, an extended project, those stages of research, and reflected kind of what was the offer at the time. And then because we've worked with students, we've worked with colleagues from all over the university and schools and colleges, we've kind of, you know, it's grown a lot, and yeah, we've got a lot of support from our local schools. And then so this project, with it being a transition project, these resources on the A-level website are for A-level students, but we also have university versions of them on the university website. So every video that's been filmed, every quiz that's been created, if it says during your A-levels, blah, 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 there's also a during your first year at university version with the same skills represented, because that was the whole point. And our university versions are being embedded in stage 1 modules for the university students, and they've been used in we have like a transition summer school project, and they were used online for that, and apparently the feedback was the best they've ever had on that. So it's it's really nice that kind of we're starting to hear this, but we're giving it the year to kind of get the word out there. But yeah, and a lot of people that kind of have used our resources previously, you know, we're hoping that, you know, when the time comes that they start working on a piece of coursework with their students, or even for new students coming along to the website, that we'll start to see a more realistic representation of where people are coming from and how they're moving around the website.
Yeah, because I think, you know, go on, sorry, Ruth, go on.
Sorry. You said that the funding had been applied for. Presumably with that came some obligation to assess the effectiveness of your work, which I have to say I always find really, really difficult in the kind of work that we're talking about. Do you have that obligation? And if so, how are you measuring the effect? If you're not able to measure really who's using it, how can you, and what their engagement has been and what their level of ability was before, how can you measure the effectiveness of it?
That's a really good question. And yeah, it is one of the trickiest parts, I think, of the job. So as part of the funding, we're very fortunate that we've got an independent evaluator of the project. So it's a colleague from the School of Education at the university. So she doesn't really know anyone in the team, isn't actually in the project, but has been around for the last 2 years observing. I've been gathering data for her. She's interviewed the 4 of the 5 student interns we worked with. She interviewed members of the project team. So our team was a cross-university team. So there was, like I said, education outreach and academic skills, but we also had like our web developers involved, and our videographers. Everyone was interviewed as part of that. And she is completing an evaluation report on the project itself, so not on the resources, and we'll have an impact report out in the new year. So hopefully that'll be something I can forward on to you guys. But in terms of the evaluation she's completing, it's through a theory of change methodology, and I will not pretend I'm an evaluator, but I understand it to be that we have our outcomes, and then we have a kind of steps of change document that outlines all of the steps. It's a really massive flow chart, all of the steps that we needed to do to get to the bottom. And as we did things, I would tell her, and she would colour them in green, and then we would add some data, and so that's how she's kind of compiled her data over the last couple of years. And so the 3 things we are measuring is the collaboration, so working across departments and working with students. That was quite a new thing for a lot of us. So a lot of times we create resource based on need, or at a point where something, you know, is demanded, but it took a lot longer to work with students. We employed our students to work with us, doing focus groups, getting in touch with schools, trying to get into A-level groups when, you know, things are really busy. It was a lot of time. So was it worth doing, and was it worth working with each other? I can safely say yes, but officially we will find out in the final report. Project management. So I'm very lucky that I'm staying at the university, but this was a project contract that was sought through funding and is quite unusual in our library. So was it worth having me? I hope the answer is yes. But was it worth having a project manager so that all the people involved could remain involved, all the right knowledge was there, but that it didn't take away from people's day jobs. So doing the delivery of workshops and other teaching and other responsibilities. And then finally, the resources, so that the outcome of the report this early on will not say, yeah, the resources are done, they're great, they're fab, it's over. It will be ongoing. So we are tracking via Google Analytics and feedback via Hotjar, which is the little 5-star rating. I think a lot of the feedback we'll have to seek anecdotally with schools that we know, purely because that's the only way we can have those deeper conversations. And most of, if not all, the work we do, we have working groups with teachers and school librarians. So up in the Northeast, we've got our Northeast School Librarians Network, which is lovely. My colleague Jackie runs that. And we know a lot of those teachers, those librarians teach on extended project or support a lot in the English curriculum as well. So we know that we can ask, and have you used it, and how have you used it? And also, what's wrong with it? Why are you not using it? So I think we're very open to asking people over the next year, but like you say, is to prove anything, as it were, I think will be difficult. The resources are kind of listed on the university's access and participation plan. So really, really important for us for like access and progression. So I think they're well thought of. But in action, we won't know for a while, and I think we will do our absolute best. But like you say, it's if you can't track who it is, anybody could just fancy looking at some stuff on referencing. We don't know if you're doing your A levels, or we like to think you are, but we don't know. So yes, so it's not really an answer, but sort of an answer.
No, it's really helpful, really helpful. Do you feel like you've got buy-in from, sorry Elizabeth, from admissions tutors and academics in the university? Are they aware of it as a resource, and do you think that they are encouraging students to use it, particularly academics?
So we were very fortunate that the project was supported by an advisory group. So we reached out to networks to be like, would you be as part of our advisory group? So they weren't in the project team, they weren't working on the resources, but we met quarterly. We had a newsletter with them, and we very much leaned on their expertise at different points of the project. And as part of that, we had an academic from each faculty. So within there, we also had student wellbeing, our academic liaison librarians, student recruitment, we had a school librarian, we had school teachers as well, A-level teachers. So we had a cross section of people, and yeah, those academics became our networks. So I already have quite a lot of evidence in terms of the university advocacy, which is really nice. So I can see when an academic has announced in their in the virtual learning environment to their course, check out these resources. We're very lucky that the library, the academic skills team, and our librarians, when they go out into the different schools across campus and they do teaching and they do kind of drop-ins and things like that, they're out spreading the word, and I think that it's testament to how the word spread, because I then get emails going, just drop into my lecture and tell my students about this, and could you tell me a bit more about these resources for stage 1 students? So I think, yeah, absolutely. And our student recruitment team, I actually met with them today to talk about reaching more A-level students, because we just in terms of resource, really they have the wider reach. So we've given them a box of flyers, said please go and chuck this QR code everywhere you can. So yeah, so we're very, very well supported, and it's been yeah, really, really lovely actually, the support we've received, both with actual hard evidence of, oh, they're using this in this course now, that's great to know, but also just the people getting in touch to say, wow, can I just say these are great? It's been really, yeah, really, really promising actually. And I'd say the most important feedback really for me was when the website went live. Our 4 student interns from this year, when they'd gone off for their summer, I emailed them to say, all your hard work's paid off, the resources are live, and they all came back saying like, wow, I can't believe we've done this, and that they would have benefited so much from it. And I think that for me is actually slightly more meaningful than from everyone else, because they've been through it. So yeah.
Yeah, I think as well is that, you know, it is going to be 2 or 3 years down the line where you're suddenly seeing students recognizing or asking or using those resources just automatically, and actually hopefully you're going to see more confident students ready to chat about their learning. Is you know, even that would be a bonus, wouldn't it? Do you know, that first instance they actually have a feeling and an understanding of what it's going to be like once they get to university, which leads me nicely onto my next question. What misconceptions do sixth form students typically have about university level research and learning?
I think there's a lot of fear about it suddenly getting, you know, exceedingly difficult. And I think the idea that it's going to be the hardest level of study. But actually, if you've chosen a subject that you enjoy and that you've dipped into during whatever your experience is, whether it's, you know, international baccalaureate or A-level or BTEC or whatever it is, that actually it's an opportunity for you to explore. And I think, you know, for most courses at most universities, the first year is weighted differently, and it's your chance to learn and try, and it's not just, oh, I have to go and you know, do exams at this really hard level. It's not, that's not the trajectory. It's actually that you're going to do more independent learning and also develop life skills at the same time. And I think the big thing is thinking that it's just A levels or BTEC or whatever it is, and then some, and that it's just that's the only change, and it's just going to be harder, and that's, you know, I think the other thing is you know, the idea that you're there to learn by yourself. Actually going to a seminar, contributing, chatting to your peers, finding out what their interests are, bouncing ideas off each other, is it's how we learn. It's how humans
Yeah,
get by. We learn from each
yeah.
other, and I think it's, you know, it's very much reflective out in a lot of workplaces as well. But if a student has kind of done their studies, you know, typically at 18, go off to university, they may have never relied on anyone else for their studies other than themselves and their teacher or their librarian. And I think there's that element of, you know, let people in, you can help each other. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I think as well is the idea that it's, you know, it has to be kind of the same, in the same way that school or college can be, you know, that it's loads and loads of work and then okay, the end. It's, you know, you're constantly building on your skills. So your first exam, okay, maybe you didn't do so well, but you use that feedback and your next exam can be better. I think that's what's the beauty of university is, you know, sometimes GCSE level can feel a bit mean because, well, year 8 or year 9 went really well for me, but it just so happened that year 11 didn't. Whereas university, you've got that space to grow and develop. And I think the slightly non-study skill related misconception would be that you just do one subject and how can I do 3 years of geography? Well, actually, it's such an what you learn at school in geography is not the same as the university. You know, it's so expansive, and lots of universities offer, you know, where you can take multiple subjects, combined honours, different modules. So I did an English literature degree, and I ended up doing creative writing and drama modules within that because that was my interest area. I had friends doing politics modules and all sorts with their English degree in the end. So I think that idea that, well, it's just going to be like a really hard version of one subject for 3 years, and that's just not true. It's not true. And I say this with having had a really great experience at university. I know it's, you know, easy to say, but yeah, it's that idea that it's just going to be really difficult and always the same.
Yeah, you see, the thing, it's really funny, isn't it? Because I suppose I can speak from my children's experience of going through school and then university. And you know, the GCSE was such a big deal for my eldest. He sort of swanned through it, and then suddenly A levels happened, and A levels was such a big jump from the GCSE that was a real wake-up call for him. But then going into university, it's all sorts of other things, isn't it? It's living on your own for a bit, and, you know, having to get up and make your own breakfast and do your own washing and everything else. But then you've got that and the study, and it's that big transition, isn't it? That what was the big thing? Oh, I've only got 8 hours of lectures or whatever it was. What am I going to do with the rest of my time? It's supposed to be self-learning. It's like, and it's that, isn't it, as well, that is a big deal, because we talk about reading around your subject at A level, and they don't feel as if they have time to do that, whereas that is a really nice step on if it's a subject that you love. And I think we talk a lot to students about the reason that they're going to university, and actually it's really important, even if they don't have an end goal, so they don't know what they want to do when they leave university, that actually they do a subject that they really love and enjoy, because actually 3 years is a long time on a subject that you don't enjoy. So all of those kind of things are important as well. It's we could talk forever.
Yeah, absolutely. The time management piece, I think, is one of its own kind, because we that idea that, well now what, I've got nothing on to do. Well, so much you could be doing.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Well, before I finish, I've just noticed the time. Before I go on to my final question, I'm just going to take a moment to introduce Engaging and Empowering School Libraries, a transformative training membership designed exclusively for innovative school librarians. If you're a school librarian passionate about fostering collaboration across all subjects, I extend a warm invitation for you to join me on this remarkable journey. My mission is simple yet powerful: to empower school librarians through comprehensive training and unwavering support. By equipping them with the necessary tools and knowledge, I aim to help you enhance independent learning, elevate literacy levels, and nurture overall student well-being through the incredible resource that is your school library. By joining my community, you'll embark on an exciting adventure alongside like-minded individuals who are equally committed to educational excellence. Together, we will explore a unique learning experience that embraces innovation and encourages the growth of your students. For more information about this extraordinary opportunity, please visit the link provided in the show notes below, and don't miss out on the chance to be part of this wonderful journey. And I'm at 49 members, so I have one more and I will have a 50th member, and they're going to get a free one-to-one. It's all very exciting. So if you're listening, sign up now. Anyway, Lauren, let's get back to this last question. What advice would you give to school libraries or educators who want to encourage sixth form students to engage with study skill resources like yours? What would you say to them? What is the ending powerful thing that you're going to say to us?
I would just say to be honest about the difficulties that students might be experiencing in their A levels and they might encounter going to university. I think the biggest thing I've gained from working with students on this project is how much they appreciate frank conversation, space to talk about their problems, and then space to talk about solutions to the problems. I think ask them what they need and point them at the specific thing that they do need, rather than information overload and here's a load of stuff that might help you at some point. Take the time to get to know what it is that the student is struggling with. For one student, referencing might be a doddle, but for another student, it's the thing that's keeping them up at night. But being open to also, if you've experienced A levels or transitioning to university studies, being open to discussing your experiences, because actually that'll help them trust that what you're saying is true. And I would always argue to get to know the students, what format suits them. So don't be saying watch all these videos if actually they prefer reading information. The format, I think, is important as well. So get to know what your students need and point them at the things that they're asking for.
Perfect, brilliant. Well, thanks for joining me today, Lauren and Ruth. Any tools that we've talked about will be in the show notes below. As always, if you'd like to comment on anything you've heard today, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on future discussions. Thank you very much for listening.